As the Middle East grappled with growing conflict in 2024, Lebanon found itself on the front lines of a deadly escalation. Amid the ongoing war in Gaza, Israel's aggression spilled over into Lebanese territory, targeting Hezbollah. In 2024, the violence rapidly escalated into a full-fledged war after Israel carried out pager and walkie-talkie attacks on Hezbollah operatives and began striking Beirut's southern suburbs and other parts of the country.
لبنان اليوم هو ضحية عدوان إلكتروني سيبراني جوي بحري.
The ceasefire announced in Lebanon is long overdue.
Ouvrir la voie à un cessez-le-feu.
To end the devastating conflict between Israel and Hezbollah.
Israel expanded its war to Lebanon in 2024 after launching a massive air campaign in late September against Hezbollah, wreaking havoc upon the civilian population. For 8 weeks, Israeli aircraft and drones pounded Hezbollah strongholds in southern Lebanon, the Bekaa Valley, as well as Lebanon's capital, Beirut. The Israeli offensive came shortly after 2 waves of pager attacks that were followed by the decimation of most of Hezbollah's top leadership, most notably assassination of its Secretary General Hassan Nasrallah on September 27. On October 1st, Israel sharply escalated its aggression when Israeli troops and tanks crossed the Lebanese border for the first time since the 2006 Lebanon war. Throughout October and November, Israel ramped up its ground incursion in southern Lebanon, capturing several key border towns and villages and utterly destroying the civilian infrastructure. Around 2 months of heavy fighting claimed more than 4,000 Lebanese lives, and on the 27th of November, the U.S., with the French assistance, brokered a ceasefire deal that brought the active phase of the conflict to an end.
The conflict between Israel and Hezbollah, reignited in October 2023, marks another chapter of resistance against Israeli aggression. The crisis began after Hamas's October 7 attacks, which triggered Israel's brutal response in Gaza. Hezbollah entered the confrontation on October 8th, launching strikes on Israeli positions in Sheba Farms and Golan Heights, expressing solidarity with the Palestinian people under siege. Hezbollah's response was met with intense Israeli retaliation. Over 10,200 cross-border attacks were recorded, with Israel responsible for the majority. The violence displaced 96,000 people in northern Israel and over 1.4 million in Lebanon, exposing the catastrophic humanitarian toll of Israel's actions. By September 2024, Israel escalated its campaign into a full-scale ground invasion, targeting Hezbollah's infrastructure in southern Lebanon. Under the banner of Operation Northern Arrow, the Israeli military conducted relentless airstrikes, leading to widespread devastation and significant civilian casualties. The invasion drew sharp criticism from the international observers for its indiscriminate nature and disregard for human life. On November 26, 2024, a ceasefire was broken by the United States and France, requiring Israel to withdraw from Lebanon and tasking Lebanese forces with securing the southern border. Despite the agreement, reports of Israeli violations, including attacks on civilians, surfaced shortly after the ceasefire took effect. This conflict highlights the ongoing resistance against Israeli aggression and the devastating consequences for civilians. While the ceasefire provides a temporary pause, the region remains fragile, with deep-rooted tensions threatening to reignite at any moment.
As Lebanon enters the second half of the 60-day ceasefire deal, Israeli officials say they believe that their forces will have to remain in southern Lebanon beyond the 60 days deadline. According to Israeli media, Israeli troops are seeking to extend their occupation of parts of southern Lebanon beyond the 60-day withdrawal period stipulated by the ceasefire agreement. The occupation army is considering remaining in some control points in southern Lebanon beyond the 60 days deadline. Sources added that Israel attributed keeping its forces in southern Lebanon to the slow deployment of the Lebanese army in the south of the country, whose presence is necessitated by the deal. The Lebanon ceasefire has held for a month now, but there are concerns that the deal is not being implemented in a timely manner by either side. Since the ceasefire was declared on November 27, the Israeli occupation forces has committed a total of 816 violations, resulting in 45 deaths. Those casualties come in addition to over 4,000 Lebanese fatalities during the war, with the majority of the deaths taking place between September and November, including women, children, and health workers, while 16,663 others have been injured. Helping us now to further explore Lebanon's 2024 from Beirut is Khaled Hamada, a military and strategic expert. Mr. Khaled, thank you so much for joining us on Qnews. And as we approach the end of 2024, the Israeli occupation forces' violations of the ceasefire agreement in Lebanon has varied, ranging from demolishing infrastructure and burning homes. And the number of these violations have exceeded 800. How do you interpret this number, and how do you assess the current situation we're witnessing now?
In fact, to be quite realistic about this matter, the Israeli violations didn't just got restricted to demolishing infrastructure and houses in the south, but Israeli warplanes as well attacked areas between Lebanon and Syria on the borders, claiming that these areas were used in the past to transfer weaponry from Syria to Lebanon to Hezbollah. And so the Israeli enemy keeps on violating the ceasefire agreement and its provisions in the south of Lebanon and on the border areas between Lebanon and Syria. In fact, the committee, for reasons we do not know, have not been able to resolve these issues despite the cascading meetings that they have convened even under the presidency of the government and the auspices of the government. They have not been able, I'm talking about the committee, it has not been able to resolve the pending issues regarding the withdrawal of the Israeli occupation forces from the south. In fact, this committee is not capacitated enough to resolve these pending issues, and that gives room for Israel to keep on violating the ceasefire agreement. And the question now, is this situation going to continue? And the other question is regarding the south, in which the Israeli occupation forces are still deployed. We have to ask ourselves a question here. Why didn't the Lebanese government get or operationalize some measures on the eastern borders in order to announce that the regular Lebanese army has imposed full control over this border areas and that no more arms can be smuggled from Syria to Lebanon, and that's just a pretext that the Israelis keep on utilizing. In fact,
now, Mr. Khaled, sorry for interrupting you, but let's analyze the situation on a wider level by looking back at the past. In your opinion, how did the 2024 conflict compare to the 2006 Lebanon war in terms of military operations?
In fact, there are major differences between the two conflicts. If we are going to speak first from a field perspective, of course, the damage capacities and the military capacities of Israel right now are much more advanced. And in the past, they used to rely heavily on infantry and land engagements. And in fact, at this point, during the 2024 conflict, they use warplanes to demolish infrastructure. And when they try to do land incursions, they do not actually emerge victorious. And Hezbollah, in fact, proves over and over that they are ahead of the Israelis in terms of land incursions. And for that matter, Israel keeps on utilizing missiles, drones that are launched based off of intelligence regarding some specific venues that they target with coordinate accuracy. In fact, Israel as well didn't want to get deep into the south of Lebanon, and it only wanted to demolish the infrastructure there. And the other thing that we have to draw our attention to is that Hezbollah in fact, did that, and we all know. In fact, in 2006, there wasn't any Gaza pretexts happening at this point. In fact, it was just the Hezbollah forces trying to counter what was happening by the Israelis. And
yes, the
resolution number 1971 was
now,
actually...
but now I would like to shed light on the assassination of Hezbollah leader Hassan Nasrallah, which has been a significant form of escalation. How did it impact the course of the conflict?
In fact, according to a New York Times report that was issued a couple of days back, which talked about an Israeli intelligence trajectory that's been perpetuated over 2 decades. In fact, this report, or from this report, it transpires that the Iranian, or that the current trajectory now is leading eventually to striking Iran. And in fact, the report issued as well by the Israeli intelligence was postulating that Israel wanted to demolish all Iranian arms in the region before it can directly strike Iran. And for that matter, we have seen how Israel has been targeting and striking Hezbollah, the Syrian regime, and the Houthis in Yemen as well. In fact, Israel as well in Palestine tried to widen the scope of the conflict from just trying to weaken Hamas all the way to the other subsidiary Iranian arms in the region. And in fact, this as well translates or interprets why the front line and the second tier and third tier leaders of Hezbollah were assassinated. In fact, even if an Israeli attack was launched on Iran, Hezbollah will never be able to fight back and counter this attack at this point.
Now, sir, Lebanon's humanitarian situation has reached alarming levels. Do you think this crisis is going to be alleviated in 2025, given Israel's continuous aggression?
In fact, there is apprehension, of course, in the international community regarding the perpetuation of this conflict into 2025. But, in fact, I don't believe that operations inside Lebanon can be operationalized.
Now, sir, sorry for interrupting you, but I would like you to stay with me. Before we continue, let's move to the UN Security Council meeting on Israeli strikes targeting the Houthis.
Strong Iranian backing and encouragement the Yemeni government since the Arab Spring of 2011, expanding through military conquests and seizing the capital Sana'a from the internationally recognized government in a September 2014 military coup. Since then, the Houthis have overrun Yemen's Red Sea ports and tried to seize the port city of Aden and the energy hub of Marib. With sustained military support from Iran, they remain postured to lunge forward at any time to snuff out the last strongholds of the internationally recognized government of Yemen. The Houthis are a clan-based military junta whose leaders have, since the 1980s, modelled their movement on Lebanese Hezbollah. Their ideology is supremacist, in favour of their own genealogical caste over all other Yemenis. And in their motto, they curse all Jewish people and openly pledge to seek the destruction of Israel and the United States of America. Madam President, the Houthis are aggressive and expansionist, presenting a multifaceted threat that I will briefly summarise today. Far from being an isolated, localised movement, they now draw military, intelligence and financial support from global partners that include Iran, Hezbollah, Iran-backed militias in Iraq, the Al-Qaeda and Al-Shabaab terrorist organisations, and reportedly also the Russian Federation. The first dimension of threat posed by the Houthis manifests inside Yemen itself. Their movement is documented by the UN panel of experts and other authorities and non-governmental organisations to have committed gross human rights abuses against the populations under their control, indoctrinating child soldiers, unlawfully detaining and torturing opponents, and diverting vital humanitarian assistance. They have kidnapped and still detain United Nations personnel, civil society workers, foreign seafarers, and staff of diplomatic missions. Since the 2018 Stockholm Agreement, the Houthis have consistently violated the UN arms embargo with Iranian assistance and used drone attacks to prevent the internationally recognised government of Yemen from from exporting existing oil and gas production that would place desperately needed funds in the government's hands. This brings me to the second dimension of the Houthi threat, the danger that they pose to regional states in the Middle East and Africa. In 2015 to 2021, the Houthis fired over 430 missiles and more than 850 drones against Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates. Key components of these missile and drone systems were found by the UN panel of experts and by other authorities to have been sent to Yemen through the UN arms embargo via Iranian government smuggling networks. The Houthis continued to threaten such attacks in order to force concessions and shape the peace process to their advantage. Most recently on July 7th, 2024, when they publicly threatened to attack Saudi Arabia's ports, airports and its central bank. Following Hamas's brutal terrorist attacks on Israel on October 7th, 2023, the Houthis also intentionally drew Yemen into the Gaza conflict by firing around 200 missiles and 170 drones at Israel. By attacking Israel, the Houthis deliberately risked bringing retaliation onto Yemen's ports, airports and fuel storage facilities, endangering humanitarian access to the country. The Stockholm Agreement was initially motivated by the need to protect these exact sites, and now the Houthis have squandered half a decade of diplomacy by opening a new military front against a distant enemy. The current exchange of fire between the Houthis and Israel will surely worsen in the coming weeks and months, but the Houthis can still choose to end this cycle. The final dimension of the Houthi threat is global. The anti-shipping campaign carried out.
That was a live broadcast of the UN Security Council meeting on the Israeli attacks on the Houthis. And now we're back to our special coverage to continue our discussion with my dear guest, Mr. Khalid Hamada. Welcome back, Mr. Khalid. And according to the terms of the ceasefire agreement, Hezbollah is supposed to dismantle its infrastructure south of the Litani River and evacuate the area. Did Hezbollah fulfill any of these terms so far?
I cannot hear the speaker. The interpreter cannot hear the speaker. The interpreter cannot hear the speaker.
There appears to be a technical malfunction. Mr. Khalid, can you hear me? Mr. Khalid, are you with me?
Excuse me. أولاً يجب يعني العودة إلى
In fact,
الاتفاق لا ينص فقط
the agreement
في جنوب الليطاني.
doesn't just have provisions regarding the disarmament of Hezbollah in the south of Litani, but in all areas of Lebanon, and as well it has provisions regarding the confiscation of Hezbollah arms. In fact, it is a misconception to think that that Hezbollah is just asked to withdraw beyond the Litani, and that's not really what the agreement is all about. In fact, what's happening today in areas that are existing to the south of Litani that are void of Israeli presence, in these areas, the Lebanese army does not confiscate any, Hezbollah infrastructure, or at least they don't let us know that they are doing so. In fact, there are other areas outside of the scope of the South Litani, and in these areas, no, Lebanese army operations are taking place relative to confiscating the infrastructure of Hezbollah there. This is a major issue. And in fact, after the end of the 60-day window, right now, after a month and 2 days has passed, in fact, it doesn't transpire that there are any serious measures operationalized by the Lebanese army to inspect and search for arms relating to Hezbollah in any of the Lebanese territories. And this, in fact, shows us that maybe the Lebanese government does not want to comply completely to the terms and provisions of this ceasefire agreement. And I believe that this is going to lead the Israelis to keep...
Mr. Khaled, sorry for interrupting you. Let's analyze the intentions of the Israeli occupations. How do you interpret that it's contingent on withdrawing from Lebanon because the Lebanese army is not prepared to take full control of the southern side of Lebanon?
In fact, I'm not saying... In fact, you know, it is not really correct that the Lebanese army is not able to impose control of border areas, but what I'm saying is that the Lebanese government did, or the Lebanese army did not put a executive framework for compliance to the ceasefire agreement. In fact, we know that this agreement is a political one and that the executive framework is a military issue. And so transforming this diplomatic or political issue into a military one is something we need to witness on the ground. What I'm trying to say is that the Lebanese government should give the Lebanese army mandate to operationalize executive military frameworks regarding imposing full control on the ground.
That was Khaled
Lebanon.
Hamada, military and strategic expert. Thank you so much for your insights. That wraps up our coverage for Lebanon in 2024. Stay tuned for the next segment where we shift our focus to the war in Gaza.